I never thought I'd be the girl who ends up back in her childhood bedroom at 32. The floral wallpaper I begged my mother to hang when I was 16 is now peeling at the corners, a faded metaphor for my own life. I'm surrounded by ghosts. The ghost of a high school diploma, the ghost of a college acceptance letter, and now, the most menacing ghost of all, a life I built, and then burned to the ground. From my window, I can see the quiet, predictable street I grew up on, the same one I swore I'd never return to. But here I am, scrolling through old photos on my phone, a digital archaeologist trying to pinpoint the exact moment the temple began to crumble. It started with Sterling. Of course, it started with him. Or rather, it started with the idea of him. I met him at a dimly lit whiskey bar that my best friend, Tessa, had dragged me to. She'd declared my dating app adventures a toxic wasteland and insisted I meet a real man in the real world. I rolled my eyes, but I went. And then I saw him. He wasn't like the finance bros or marketing guys I usually dated, the ones who talked about their stock portfolios and spent half their paycheck on protein powder. Sterling was different. He had grease under his fingernails that no amount of soap could scrub away, and he spoke about engine manifolds and chassis restoration with a reverence other men reserved for sports teams. He owned a vintage car restoration shop, the kind of place where men with more money than sense brought their prized possessions to be reborn. He had built it from nothing, and his passion was magnetic. I didn't understand a word he was saying that first night, but I understood the fire in his eyes. It was real. What really got me was his directness. He asked for my number, and then he actually called me. A phone call. In this decade. He told me he liked me and wanted to take me to dinner. No vague "let's hang out" or "see where this goes." It was honest, confident, and utterly disarming. The first few months were a blur of cinematic romance. He'd show up at the bank where I worked as a teller, holding a bag with my favorite sandwich, just because. He remembered that I had a bizarre obsession with a limited edition flavor of Oreos, and bought every package he could find. He listened. He saw me, and the physical connection, it was explosive. The kind of chemistry that makes you forget your own name. I felt like the star of a movie, the kind Tessa was always watching on rainy Sundays. I had found my person. The cracks started to show around the 4th month, but I was too blinded by the highlight reel to notice them. Sterling was meticulous with money. He had to be. He'd built his business on careful planning and fiscal discipline. Me? Not so much. Working at a bank didn't make me good with finances. It just made me an expert at juggling credit card balances. I had this thing about appearances. When you're dating a successful, respected business owner, you can't exactly show up in the same dress twice on your Instagram feed. That's what I told myself. Anyway. So I spent a little more on clothes than I should have. A weekend trip to a boutique hotel that was definitely not in my budget. A handbag that cost more than my rent. They were investments in my image, in our image. That's the story I spun for myself every time I swiped my card. Sterling didn't need to know the details. I became skilled at hiding shopping bags in the trunk of my car, having packages delivered to Tessa's apartment. It was a small, harmless secret. When he proposed at 8 months, it was at a vintage car show, where his prized restoration, a stunning 1967 Mustang, was on display. He had worked the proposal into the award ceremony, and as the crowd cheered, he slipped a gorgeous ring on my finger. He'd gotten my size from Tessa months ago. Every detail was perfect. In that moment, surrounded by flashing cameras and the smell of polished chrome, I convinced myself the spending would stop. New marriage, new me. Looking back, I can see why he fell for me. I was the glittering, spontaneous creature that balanced out his serious, grounded nature. While he spent his weekends meticulously working on cars, I planned elaborate dinner parties and curated our life to look effortlessly perfect online. He needed my sparkle, and I thought I needed his stability to finally get my act together. We were both wrong. We were both in love with a fantasy, a carefully edited portrait of a person. And we were about to learn that real life doesn't come with a filter. Our honeymoon in Cabo was supposed to be the official start of our perfect forever. I'd booked a breathtaking suite with a private infinity pool overlooking the ocean. It was wildly outside the budget we'd agreed upon, but come on, it's your honeymoon. You're supposed to go all out. The problem was, I'd put it on my credit card, the one he didn't know about. The illusion shattered on our third day. Sterling found the printed confirmation email I'd carelessly left on the desk. He didn't yell. In some ways, I wish he had. Yelling I could handle. I could yell back. Instead, he just stared at the paper, his face a mask of quiet confusion. The price I'd paid was printed in bold black ink. An accusation in itself. "Delilah," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "Can we talk about our financial goals when we get home?" A business meeting. He wanted to have a business meeting on our honeymoon. That moment set the tone for our first year of marriage. Everything became about budgets, spreadsheets, and financial responsibility. Our joint account became his personal auditing project. He'd question every purchase. "Do you really need another pair of heels? Didn't you just buy new makeup last week?" It was exhausting. I felt like an employee undergoing a performance review, not a wife. To cope, my secret life flourished. The harmless secret became a necessary deception. I had things delivered to my office. I opened another credit card, just for emergencies. The more he tried to rein me in, the more I felt a desperate need to have something that was just mine, something he couldn't track or question. It wasn't just the money. His protectiveness, which I'd once found sweet, began to curdle into something that felt like possession. If I wore a dress for a girls' night out with Tessa, he'd make a comment. "That's a bit short for a married woman, don't you think?" Or, "Maybe you should wear a cardigan over that." At first, I'd laugh it off, but it grew more frequent, more insistent. His jealousy, once a flattering sign of his affection, became a heavy blanket. At parties, I'd see his jaw clench if another man lingered in conversation with me for too long. He'd suddenly appear by my side, his arms snaking around my waist, marking his territory. He started coincidentally showing up places. If I was having lunch with coworkers, he'd just happen to be picking up parts nearby and decide to surprise me. I wasn't stupid. He was checking up on me. I started venting to Tessa over glasses of overpriced wine. She'd been through a messy divorce herself, and she was my staunchest ally. "That's not protective, Delilah. That's controlling," she'd say, her eyes flashing with righteous anger on my behalf. "He's using money to manipulate you. It's financial abuse." She showed me articles about toxic relationships and controlling partners. I read the checklists, and the words seemed to fit. Monitors your spending? Check. Criticizes your appearance? Check. Isolates you from friends? Well, he wasn't doing that, but his hovering was making it hard to relax. Tessa's words gave my resentment a name. It wasn't my spending that was the problem, it was his control. I wasn't being deceitful, I was being resourceful. I was a victim fighting for my autonomy. That became my narrative. Every hidden shopping bag was a small victory. Every purchase on my secret card was an act of defiance. I was living a life in two acts. Act 1 was for Sterling, the dutiful wife who nodded along during budget talks. Act 2 was for me, the woman who refused to be caged, who deserved nice things, who was simply taking back her power one designer purchase at a time. I was so busy playing both parts, I didn't realize the entire stage was about to collapse. The game shifted. Hiding was no longer enough. It was passive. I wanted him to see my rebellion. I wanted him to feel the same powerlessness I felt every time he checked our bank account. So, I began to provoke him. It was a childish, toxic dance. If he made a comment about a dress being too revealing, I'd accidentally unbutton one more button before we left the house. If he got quiet and tense about me posting a selfie from a night out with Tessa, I'd post 3 more, complete with captions about living my best life. Each time I saw that muscle twitch in his jaw, I felt a sick, satisfying thrill. It was a confirmation. I could still affect him. I still had power. The centerpiece of my rebellion became a dress. A gorgeous, ruinously expensive slip dress from Revolve, the color of spilled wine. It cost nearly $1,000, a purchase made with a shaky hand on my secret credit card, the one whose balance was now approaching a terrifying number. The dress was a declaration. It wasn't just fabric and thread. It was a weapon. The kind of dress that makes every head turn when you walk into a room. I wore it for the first time to his friend Declan's birthday dinner. I knew it would drive him crazy. And it did. The whole night, I felt his eyes on me, a constant, burning surveillance. He watched every man who glanced in my direction. Declan's wife, Nora, A sensible woman who dressed exclusively in shades of beige, kept giving me knowing looks. She knew exactly what I was doing. Every time Sterling tensed up, when a waiter smiled at me, or when his single friend Reese complimented my dress, I felt that weird satisfaction again. See? A voice in my head whispered. This is what you're so afraid of. But you can't control it. At home, the tension was suffocating. He'd created a shared calendar on our phones, supposedly to coordinate our schedules. In reality, it was another tracking device. If I went for a coffee at a time that wasn't on the calendar, I'd get a text. Everything okay? Saw a charge from that coffee shop on Elm Street. Meanwhile, he'd spend thousands on a rare engine part for a client's Porsche without blinking. It's a business expense, Delilah. It's an investment. My investments, however, the clothes and bags I needed to maintain a professional image at the bank and a social image among his successful friends, were deemed frivolous. Following Tessa's advice, I started my dossier. I screenshot texts where he questioned my whereabouts. I took photos of his car parked outside my gym when he was supposed to be at his shop. I made mental notes of every comment about my makeup, my friends, my spending. I was building my case, brick by brick, constructing a narrative where I was the blameless heroine and he was the villain. I never once stopped to think that my lies were the foundation he was building his prison on. My deceit was the disease, and his control was just a symptom. The week before everything exploded, I maxed out another credit card on a whole new wardrobe I'd been eyeing online. I kept it all in the trunk of my car, a secret treasure trove of defiance. The guilt was there, a dull ache beneath the surface, but the thrill of having something he couldn't touch was stronger. Every time he questioned a purchase or made a comment about my appearance, I added it to my mental list of grievances. I fantasized about the day I'd throw it all in his face, showing him how his own behavior had pushed me to this. I wanted him to feel as trapped and scrutinized as I did. I didn't see that we were both playing a game we couldn't win. He was trying to control everything because he was terrified of losing me, of the unstable, unpredictable woman he'd married. I was rebelling against that control, because I was terrified of losing myself, of becoming another boring, sensible wife like Nora. That Friday night, as I pulled on the red dress again, I had no idea I was about to push us right over the edge, but a part of me was ready for it, ready to explode, ready to hurt him like he'd been hurting me. I just didn't realize how much of the shrapnel would end up in me. The restaurant was the kind of place Sterling loved for its steaks and I loved for its scene. Low, moody lighting, overpriced cocktails, and a clientele that looked like they'd all stepped out of a magazine. Our regular crew was there, Declan and Nora, Reese and his new girlfriend, a few other couples from Sterling's car world. The tension started before we even left the house. Sterling saw me coming down the stairs in the red dress, and his face went blank. Really, Delilah? That dress again? He said it quietly, but it sounded like a reprimand from a disappointed father. I pretended not to hear him, and took an extra 10 minutes fixing my makeup, making us 15 minutes late. I knew he hated being late. At dinner, I was performing. I made sure to sit in a chair where everyone could see me, not tucked away in a corner booth as he'd suggested. I ordered the most expensive bottle of Cabernet on the menu, watching his face tighten as I told the waiter to keep it coming. Every time he shot me his silent, slow-down look from across the table, I'd hold his gaze and take another deliberate, slow sip. It was petty, it was childish, but I was so tired of being managed. The breaking point came during dessert. I was taking a few laughing selfies with Nora and Reese's girlfriend. Just innocent, fun photos. But Sterling leaned over, his voice a low hiss in my ear meant only for me. Maybe take those down. Your dress is riding up too high. He said it right there, in front of everyone. I saw Nora pretend to be engrossed in her creme brulee, but Reese's girlfriend definitely heard. She gave me that look, that quick, sympathetic glance that women give each other. It was a look of pity, and it made my blood boil. That's when I snapped. Maybe it was the third glass of wine. Maybe it was months of simmering resentment. But something inside me broke. You know what your problem is, Sterling? I said it loudly. Loud enough for the whole table to hear. He looked up, startled. The table went silent. You're so obsessed with controlling me because you're actually turned on by other men wanting me. The silence was now absolute. Nora nearly choked on her wine. I knew I should stop, but the words were a torrent and the dam had burst. That's right, everyone, I continued. a manic grin spreading across my face. My husband's a cuck. He probably gets off on imagining other guys with me. That's why he's so obsessed with what I wear and who I talk to. Declan let out a nervous laugh before Nora jabbed him with her elbow. Reese suddenly became fascinated by the pattern on his steak knife. But Sterling, he just sat there. His face was completely devoid of emotion, except for a single muscle twitching violently in his jaw. The sight was both terrifying and exhilarating. In fact, I plowed on, riding a wave of drunken courage. Maybe that's why you follow me around and monitor everything I do. Getting a little thrill out of it, aren't you, baby? I expected him to explode, to yell, to cause a scene, to give me the fight I so desperately wanted. Instead, he looked at me with cold, dead eyes and said in the quietest voice I'd ever heard, "We're done here." It wasn't angry. It was final. Like a judge delivering a verdict. The drive home was a new kind of silent. Not our usual tense silence, but a hollow, empty one. The silence of an ending. I kept waiting for him to break, to yell, to give me something I could use to justify what I'd done. But he just drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, while I fought back tears I didn't even understand. I had wanted to hurt him, and I had succeeded. I could see it in the rigid set of his shoulders. For the first time, a cold pit of fear opened in my stomach. Maybe I'd gone too far. When we got home, he walked straight into his home office and shut the door. I heard the low murmur of his voice on the phone. Still in that stupid red dress, I stood in our kitchen, the silence of the house pressing in on me. I thought maybe if I apologized, if I blamed the wine, we could sweep this under the rug like all the other fights. But, before I could, he emerged from the office. He had his phone in his hand, and the way he held it made my stomach clench. I was still drunk enough to be bold. "Come to apologize for embarrassing me at dinner?" I slurred. "No, Delilah," he said, his voice unnervously calm. "I think it's time we had an honest conversation. Let's talk about who's really been embarrassing who." He placed his phone on the kitchen island, screen up. I didn't know it then, but he was recording. I wish I'd kept my mouth shut. But the wine and the rage made me reckless. I launched into a tirade, repeating my accusations from dinner, calling him weak and insecure. Then he pulled out the papers. Bank statements, credit card bills. My secret life, laid out in black and white. "You want to talk about pathetic, Delilah? Let's talk about the 3 maxed out credit cards you opened behind my back. Let's talk about how you've been stealing from our house down payment fund to buy clothes you hide in your car." The blood drained from my face. I fought back, throwing his controlling behavior in his face, calling him a stalker. "Is that what you're going to tell people?" he asked, picking up his phone. And then I knew, because I think the evidence tells a different story. The credit card statements, the hidden shopping. This conversation, right here, it all shows exactly who's been doing the manipulating. "You can't record me without my permission," I stammered. "In this state, I can," he said calmly. "One-party consent. Look it up." He turned and walked away, leaving me standing there. I heard him grab his keys, heard the garage door open. I wanted to run after him, to beg, to snatch his phone, but I was frozen. Because deep down, under all the whine and anger and justifications, I knew he was right. The recording had captured exactly who I was. Not the victim I'd pretended to be, but someone else entirely. Someone I didn't want to face. A week later, a courier delivered a manila envelope to my desk at the bank. Right there, in front of my coworkers, I was served with divorce papers. The humiliation was a physical blow. I had to leave early, my face streaked with mascara, pretending not to notice the averted eyes, and sudden whispers as I walked out. This wasn't just another fight. This was real. The recording became the centerpiece of the divorce proceedings. My lawyer played it for me, in her sterile, beige office. Hearing my own voice drunk, cruel, venomous was like listening to a stranger. I heard myself twisting reality, hurling baseless, emasculating accusations. I heard the cold, hard evidence in Sterling's calm responses. My lawyer winced through the whole thing. "Maybe we should consider a quick settlement," she suggested, not quite meeting my eyes. I tried to control the narrative on social media, my last remaining battlefield. I posted long, rambling paragraphs about breaking free from financial abuse and reclaiming my power. It was a valiant effort, but it was useless. Sterling's friends, people who had been my friends, started commenting. Not with insults, but with receipts. Screenshots of my boastful shopping hauls from my private Instagram story. Pictures of me at parties, deliberately flirting with other men while Sterling stood in the background, his face tight with anger. That awful recording, or at least transcripts of it, somehow leaked. The comment sections turned brutal. Gaslighter, manipulator, narcissist. I had to delete my Instagram account. My parents weren't any help. My mother sat at her kitchen table, shaking her head as she looked through the credit card statements my lawyer had forwarded. "We didn't raise you to be this person, Delilah," she said, her voice heavy with a disappointment that was worse than anger. "My father wouldn't even look at me. They let me move back into my old bedroom. But it was clear they were Team Sterling. That's when I got Winston. He's an adorable French bulldog puppy I found online, with a price tag that made my stomach lurch. The lady at the rescue gave me a strange look when I handed over my last, nearly maxed out credit card, but I didn't care. I needed something good in my life. Everyone was acting like I was this terrible person, but Winston looked at me like I was his entire world. He became my prop, my shield. I created a new, private Instagram account. My new identity was born, the empowered, single dog mom. I started posting filtered photos of me and my new man, cuddling in bed, going for walks in the park. The captions were dripping with saccharine, meaning, "Who needs a husband when you have unconditional love? Traded rings for paws?" A few of my remaining friends liked the posts, but I knew most people could see through the flimsy facade. Meanwhile, in the real world, Sterling was thriving. His shop was doing better than ever. I heard through Nora, who still answered my texts, mostly out of pity that a lot of his male clients were relieved they didn't have to deal with his psycho wife anymore. I drove by his shop one day, my car windows tinted like a spy's. I saw him laughing with a customer. He looked lighter, as if he'd dropped 100 pounds of weight. I hadn't realized that weight had been me. The bankruptcy proceedings are a special kind of hell. A court-appointed trustee sifts through the wreckage of your financial life while you sit there, trying to look appropriately remorseful. It turns out that when you hide credit cards from your husband and run up tens of thousands of dollars in secret debt, the court doesn't look upon you favorably. I had to sell most of my designer things. The bags, the shoes, the clothes, all sold for pennies on the dollar to consignment websites. The only thing I kept was the red dress. It hangs in the back of my closet, shrouded in a plastic garment bag like a toxic souvenir. My court-mandated therapist says I'm using avoidance mechanisms. She says I haven't taken accountability. What does she know? I started a TikTok account, Delilah and Winnie, documenting my new fabulous life. It only has about 200 followers, mostly bots and a few pity follows from old high school friends, but it's growing. I post videos of Winston wearing a tiny Burberry scarf I bought for him, of me making him organic dog treats in my parents' kitchen. Sure, some people leave comments like, "Isn't this the woman who bankrupted her husband?" But I just delete them and block the user. Haters are gonna hate. The hardest part is seeing Sterling move on. Nora told me he's dating someone. Her name is Clara, and she's a financial advisor. Of course she is. She helps women achieve financial literacy. I stalked her on LinkedIn. She looks like she gets all her clothes from Ann Taylor Loft, and probably has a perfect 800 credit score. He couldn't have been more obvious about replacing me with my complete opposite. Last week, I maxed out my last remaining credit card on designer accessories for Winston. A Gucci carrier, a Tiffany dog bowl. My parents watched me unpack the box with expressions of utter despair. They don't get it. When you're a dog mom influencer, you have to maintain a certain image. Besides, Winston deserves nice things. He's the only one who doesn't judge me. My lawyer keeps trying to get me to focus on the settlement, but I'm more concerned with my new brand. I even created a new dating profile. I used my best pictures with Winston, naturally. My bio describes me as a strong, independent woman who knows her worth and a devoted dog mom. My therapist says I'm nowhere near ready to date, but I feel like it's important to put myself out there. Sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet and Winston is snoring in his monogrammed dog bed beside me, the truth tries to creep in. I think about that dinner. I think about how I could have just talked to him, how I could have admitted I was in over my head and scared. I think about how maybe he wasn't being controlling. Maybe he just saw the train wreck coming down the tracks and was desperately, clumsily trying to pull the brakes. But those thoughts don't last long. They're too heavy, too sharp. It's easier to pick up my phone, to find a cute, filtered photo of me and Winston, and to post it with a caption about healing and growth. It's easier to pretend I'm living my best life. Yesterday, I drove past his shop again. I saw him and Clara leaving together. She was wearing sensible shoes and carrying a practical handbag that probably cost less than Winston's winter coat. They were holding hands and laughing. They looked happy. Genuinely, boringly, beautifully happy. The kind of happy I once had and threw away because I thought it wasn't shiny enough. Whatever. I've got Winston now. And he's better than any husband. Sure, I'm living in my childhood bedroom at 32, drowning in debt, and spending money I don't have on dog accessories. But at least no one's controlling me anymore. At least I'm free to be myself. Even if I'm not totally sure who that is without the shopping, and the drama, and the games, maybe someday I'll meet someone who appreciates me for who I am. Until then, I've got my fur baby, and my TikTok followers, and this story I tell myself, the one where I'm the victim in all this. It's not much, but it's better than admitting the truth. That maybe, just maybe, I was the one who destroyed everything good in my life.